Hey guys, welcome back to another video. And today we're taking a deeper, closer look at Ruben Dias. And for this video, I thought it'd be a good idea to get an expert who knows a little bit more about me, even being honest, about Ruben Dias. And of course, it had to be Adrian from Rabona TV, who's here to fulfill us and all your Ruben Dias needs and your curiosities and all that kind of stuff. Adrian, thank you for coming on the channel, mate. How are you doing? And welcome.
Hey, Stephen, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to talk Ruben, one of my favorite players that has come through the Benfica Academy. So let's do it, man.
I'm so excited to have you as well, because as soon as I tweeted out about, someone to talk about Ruben Dias, pretty much everyone replied suggesting yourself. So, and honestly, I've been watching your content and it's really cool. It's really, really good. So go and check out Adrian's channel down in the comment, by the way, down in the description below. And there'll be a card on the screen right now as well. So make sure you go subscribe. He's basically done a better video than the one we're about to do now. So watch that as well, basically. But for now, though, Adrian, we're going to start, if you don't mind, just with a talking point that I kind of want to get to. I know football is very, very... it's very fickle in nature, really. Obviously, there's always kind of like hype behind certain plays, and sometimes it can peak and trough and all that kind of stuff, just like that, basically, overnight. But what we wanted to talk about is essentially why people have kind of gone off Ruben Dias over the last year or so, to the extent where some people have said he's almost maybe even be overrated. Because I know a year ago, if we'd signed Ruben Dias, everyone would have been happy as a Manchester City fan. But it felt like something shifted a little bit. Is it fair? Is it just the cyclical nature of football? Is it fickle? What's your take on this side of things?
I think that you're right. I think that it's the fickle nature of football, and that there's always sort of a new toy to play with, and people get over older players. Older. He's only 23.
Yeah,
they get over the players that have been talked about for too long. Because I mean, for the last 2-3 years, he's been linked away from Benfica. But I do think that the lack of success from Benfica in last season is definitely contributed to this lack of hype towards some of the players at our club. We famously had this insane collapse in the second half of the season. We started so well with this. I remember Bruno Lage was being linked to Wolves, etc. He was seen as the next Mourinho. And we just completely collapsed. We blew a 7-point lead at the halfway point, ended up losing to Porto, ended up losing every cup competition, just doing a terrible, terrible job in the second half of the season. And as a consequence of that, I think that a lot of the sort of glow and aura that was surrounding some of our players, our prized assets, it got dimmed a little bit. And that's not to say that Ruben has been a poor player in the last season, because we went through a bit of a defensive emergency at Benfica. We had constant injuries. We had Jardel, who's our captain.
Yeah.
Sort of a, I don't know how I'd say it, but he's like 35, 36. He's old. He's basically captain just because he's been there the longest, but he barely ever plays because he's always injured. We had Ferro coming through the season prior. He did excellent alongside Ruben. They were an amazing partnership, but then he had constant injuries. He fell way out of form and was playing terribly. So there was a revolving door next to Ruben. And then on the flanks, I mean, you touched on it in your video, which was great. Andre Almeida as a right back, the right back position, as you said, it is a bit of a meme for Benfica. We haven't had a right back for, it feels like a decade.
Someone else passing that on to me, by the way, but it made me laugh either way. So maybe your meme is right back, ours is unfortunately left back, but
Yes,
but
yes, that's it. Yeah, so, I mean, he had to constantly deal with covering on the right. He had to constantly deal with a revolving door of center-back partnerships. Our defense just in general was a bit of a joke. It's among Benfica fans, we seem to have like 3 or 4 Tavares kids in our academy. So there's David Tavares, Thomas Tavares, who has been linked with Spurs actually, and it would always be Ruben and then a few Tavares in the back line. You'd sort of take your pick of which one was going to be in there next. And so we struggled defensively, and I think that ultimately hurt his reputation a little bit. I think it's a little bit unjust. I think that he's proven that he's been, consistent in his performances, especially when you look at his performances in the Portuguese national team.
How do you think his individual season compared to the 18-19 season, which obviously was one of the reasons that people got were drawn to him in the first place? Because I mean, genuinely a year ago, I do remember him being at his roundest peak. Of course, as well, he was excellent in the UEFA Nations League as well for Portugal, and there was a lot of hype around him. I mean, how do his individual performances, away from all that kind of noise surrounding the inconsistencies around him, how did they stack up in your personal opinion compared to the season beforehand?
If I'm being completely honest, I think that it was slightly less as good as the 18-19 performance, because I think that perhaps mentally he was thinking he had to take on more responsibility than could be reasonably asked of someone to sort of be the entire defense for us, to be
Yeah.
that. I mean, he's already basically he functions as our captain, even though he's not technically. There's two guys ahead of him, or there was two guys ahead of him because he's gone now. But
I know how that feels. Don't worry, I know that feels.
yeah,
Sorry, Silver Company. It's painful, isn't it? But
it is.
we all get old, unfortunately.
But yeah, I do think that if you were to directly compare 1819 to 1920, I would say that 1920 wasn't as glowing, but you still see that he has all of the attributes that had made him so attractive to all these teams prior.
I would like to talk about some of those attributes, then, if that's okay, in terms of his strengths and so on. What is, in your opinion, what is his greatest individual asset that makes him who he is, basically?
When I think of Ruben, I think of someone who is, let's talk about a few attributes. I think primarily of him as a leader and a communicator. I wouldn't trust anyone more than him to lead a team. I think that one-on-one, he's an absolute bastard to try and get past. He's an incredible defender one-on-one. And with the ball at his feet, I think he's going to be a huge asset for you guys because he can spray a pass well, short, long, good diagonal balls to the fullbacks that are pushing up. Yeah, I'd say, and I mean, he can drive forward with the ball at his feet as well. Yep. That is something that he can do, perhaps a little less so than some other defenders. When you think of, I guess in the Premier League, you'd think of Harry Maguire or something like that, who likes to drive forward with the ball at his feet. So he doesn't do it as often, but his passing is going to be an absolute asset to the back line and springing counterattacks from the back.
Am I right in saying that he loves a diagonal as well that crossed over to the fullback? Because that's obviously a very Laporte tactic as well. Laporte loves that kind of pinging it over to the right side. Can we expect basically him pinging it over to the left quite a lot?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because Laporte plays center left.
Yeah, left centre back, and he uses left foot to reach it over to the right wing quite a lot. So I can imagine Laporte's going that way and Ruben Dias is going that way in passing, which is obviously a very natural partnership, hopefully.
Yeah, I think it could be. I think there's a lot of potential for it to be a very good partnership, and that, I mean, he can play on the left side of the center back pairing as he does for Portugal, and he's fairly two-footed in my opinion. Okay. Perhaps his long ball isn't as good with his left foot, but I think if he needs to play on that left side of defense, it's going to be no problem because that's what he does alongside Pepe for the national team.
Has this talk of him being a leader, us City fans, are we getting carried away, or is he really that much of someone, is he really that reliable in terms of a leader? And it's a hard ask because no one can fulfill Vincent Kompany's legacy at Manchester City, but can he come in your opinion, and provide a little bit of that same energy and a little bit of that aura that can help maybe just, because City are in a little bit of an emotional slump at the moment. I think that's probably fair to say. I mean, you're probably not quite as familiar looking from the outside in, but it feels like City have a squad at the moment who look around for someone else to take the lead, to lead by example, basically. Do you think Dias can come in and maybe fulfill a little bit of that kind of vacancy, really, in terms of leadership?
Yeah, I think he can. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how immediate that will come into play because, moving to a new club, he's not the guy anymore. He's been at Benfica since, I think, 2008 or something like that, since he was 11 years old. So he's moved through the ranks and he's been a leader throughout that time. So this is the first time he's moving to another club. It's going to be interesting to see how he adapts and how he takes on that responsibility. But I do believe that given time to settle, he can be that guy. And I mean, you've seen already that his English is good, which is a great start, Yeah. So I think that he can sort of fill that void. I'm not going to say that he's going to fill the void that Kompany left because that has quite clearly been something that you guys have been struggling with. But I think that given time, he absolutely could be that kind of character because he was en route to be the Benfica. Well, he was already the Benfica captain, but he was en route to be sort of a Luizão figure, if you remember him at Benfica.
So we have to get onto the weaknesses bit because obviously, I think it's fair to say as well, people forget this. I think generally when a player is described as a leader, you often forget that they can also be youthful and still at the start of their career, so to speak, as well. And I think Ruben Dias is a big, imposing guy. He feels like he's been around for a while, despite not really being at the highest level for an awful long time. And because he's powerful and because he looks mature, people forget as well, he is literally just turned 23. So in terms of football, he's a baby still. He really is pretty young. So I think it's worth adding that caveat before we discuss the weaknesses, because I think that's a fair thing to say, basically, that he's still at the nascent stage of his career generally. But naturally, as with anything, with centre-backs at 23, unless there's some kind of freak of nature, you're going to have weaknesses, aren't you? What are the notable weaknesses that you think us as City fans should maybe be concerned about?
I think the most notable weakness for him is his defending of space, open space. He does have a tendency to push forward to try and push people offside to sort of bring the defensive line forward, but that leaves you exposed behind. And defending space, he'll also try to rush forward and cut off the attack before it even happens sometimes, which can either lead to a foul or, again, more exposure behind him. So if that fullback isn't covering or a center back partner isn't covering, that can be an issue for sure. I remember thinking that he gives away a lot of penalties in the past, but in looking at his stats from last season, he only gave away one, I believe, in the league. So that's something that he's improved upon. Exactly.
For defenders as well, and as you were saying in your video as well, it is kind of normal for defenders to give away a penalty, because they are the last line of defense, aren't they? So
exactly. And he's sort of regarded as this guy, like he's sort of seen as a hot-headed guy, but he's not at all. Like he's never had a straight red card in his career. So he is one of those guys that plays along the edge of, fire and aggression and passion, but sometimes that can lead to frustrating fouls. Sometimes that can lead to penalties. I guess not as much as I thought, though. So it's one of those things. It's one of those double-edged swords where at times it can be great for the team and at times it can be to the detriment.
One of the things that's been thrown at him a lot as well, this is probably why I shouldn't pay too much attention to Twitter, but largely people said he's got absolutely no pace at all. I don't recall him being that slow. I mean, I feel like that was a little bit harsh from what I recalled the last time I saw him, but what is your take as a regular viewer of Benfica? What's his pace like?
I've never thought of him as an absolute tortoise on the pitch. So I don't know where that's really coming from. Is he the fastest defender I've ever seen?
Probably FIFA stats, or something like that.
Yeah,
it will be FIFA stats.
But I wouldn't say that he's slow or that he's going to be caught out in every single foot race or something like that.
That's good to hear. I mean, I wouldn't say Laporte is the fastest either, but I wouldn't say Laporte is slow either. And I guess if you're like 6'2" and pretty solid like he is, it's tough to get round these players, isn't it? Because they're so big and imposing that they take up an awful lot of space on the pitch generally anyway. So are there any other concerns in general, that you can think off the top of your head? If not, no worries. But are there any other weaknesses to his game that stand out? Are there any rough edges that you think he could improve on, maybe potentially?
I think that... Now, this actually just sprung up because I was looking at his Opta stats and his aerial duels. Apparently, he only wins 60% of them, which to me seems a bit off, but I guess we'll go with Opta. We'll trust them. Yeah. So I think that physicality part of his game, that aerial part of his game could improve in the midfield area, because once he's in the box and he's attacking from corners, he's a threat. So I think that sort of standing still aerial is something that he needs to improve upon, and something that if he's up against a really tall striker, maybe that could be an issue. And also it must be said, Benfica have been absolutely horrible at defending set pieces. So does he shoulder some of that responsibility? He probably does. It also speaks to our back line being terrible as well, but I'm sure he still has to shoulder some of that responsibility.
So one thing I'd like to touch on finally is what you think his potential is, basically. How far do you think he could go in general in football? Because once again, there are caveats, and it's obviously none of us have got a crystal ball. We don't fully know. But the idea is that City have a lot of faith in this guy. And some players, my personal take sometimes is that some players improve around, a higher level. And with all due respect to Benfica, obviously he's going to be playing with, some better players than what Benfica have at the moment. I think it's fair to say, obviously Guardiola's one of the best coaches in world football as well. Do you think he'll adapt to this? I mean, personally, how far do you think he can go at Manchester City? What's your honest opinion on this? And don't worry, regardless, whichever way you want to go for it, what's your opinion on how well Ruben Dias will do at Manchester City?
I think that he definitely has the potential to do extremely well, and I will point towards how well he does for the Portuguese national team when he has higher quality defenders around him. I mean, I'm picturing Ruben Dias alongside Laporte, with Fernandinho in front of him, with Walker to the right. And then on the other side, I guess, Zinchenko, Mendy, I don't know. We'll see if you guys get someone else in there.
We'll see.
But I think that surrounded by those higher quality players, if you want to compare those players to what Portugal has in the national team, some of which, even Cancelo, direct fit, he shines. I can't think of a match where I thought, man, Ruben is not doing well. Like, he doesn't really put a foot wrong. His performances in the Nations League, especially in the final where he was the man of the match against the Netherlands, I think that all points towards him having a ton of promise for City. Of course, there's always the intangibles that, like you said, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know how well
Yeah.
he's going to adapt and everything, but the potential is definitely there for him to be a very solid defender and a great leader within the team.
Finally, are you going to miss him at Benfica? I know that sounds obvious, but I mean, how has this gone down amongst the Benfica fans? Was it expected, or is it still stinging a little bit?
I mean, there's always some fans that are saying, he wasn't that good anyways. We got a great deal, we got this amount of money plus Otamendi. That's perfect. Which, by the way, had you told me that our center back pairing was going to be Otamendi and Vertonghen at the beginning of the summer?
Yeah, that's
what?
bad, isn't it?
Like, it doesn't make sense. But
Look after
I
him.
think that, yeah,
Look
we
after
will. We
Otamendi.
will.
I mean, he's mad, but he can be brilliant on his day, but he can also be a pain in the arse. But
Yeah.
thankfully, hopefully, he brings out his best, because I mean, literally genuinely at one point, he was one of the best defenders in the world. In 17-18 season, he was in the Premier League team of the season. He was absolutely fantastic that season. So if you can get that Otamendi back, you've got a very likable, but he can be inconsistent, but hopefully he should do a job for you anyway. Genuinely.
I think you're onto something there. I mean, there's obviously some baggage with him being a former Porto player,
Yeah, that's bad.
stuff like that. But yeah, I think he's going to do a job. But as far as Ruben goes, I think that losing João Felix last summer, he was our golden boy, and that obviously hurt. But with Ruben, it hurt a lot more because he was seen as the future of Benfica, and of course we were under no illusions that he was going to stay his entire career at Benfica.
Yeah.
But he really sort of embodied the badge. He was that fighter, he was that passion, he was a leader, and he was a quality defender to boot. So this one really hurt to see him go. We all thought that he was going to stay for the entirety of the season, and to be honest with you, I think that he might have thought that he was going to stay this season as well under Jorge Jesus. But the time had come, and so we have to say goodbye. We're used to seeing all of our academy boys leave at this point. They're all over Europe now.
Yeah, I can imagine, man. It's tough. I mean, I can relate to watching you star boys go and all that, because I'm old enough to remember when City had to watch our best players go. I still cry at the idea of Sean Wright Phillips leaving City. But mate, thank you so much for joining me for this video. It's been really, really appreciated, guys. Please do go check out Adrian's channel if you haven't already at Rabona TV. There'll be a link literally on screen right now, a card. So click that, subscribe it, and do Adrian a favor, because he definitely deserves it, because he's got a fantastic channel over there. Adrian, thank you so much for coming on, mate. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much for having me, and take care of our boy, please. He's going to be great. You're going to love him. I know it. I can't wait until the first derby against United so you can see that fire that he has.
Yeah, I wish I could fully say the same about Otamendi, but fingers crossed for you guys. I mean, they're at different ends of their career, but I mean, Otamendi, you won't get anything other than 100% from him, which I will say, which is always admirable at the very least. But
yes,
it could be great for you, and of course he knows the country and all that kind of stuff. So fingers crossed. Enjoy Otamendi, guys. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Go check out Adrian's video as well on a similar subject. It'll be on screen right now as well. Make sure to hit the subscribe button if you are new to the channel. Hopefully you're very excited about Ruben Dias. Let me know down in the comments what you make of this transfer, and I'll see you later for another video in a bit.